I was halfway through my third coffee of the morning, stirring it absent-mindedly, when she appeared behind the counter. Not that she worked there. She never worked anywhere, really, but she was always here, hovering near the pastries, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. I must have looked up because she smiled. Not a full smile, more like a secret someone lets slip for a second too long. "Careful," she said to no one in particular, leaning toward the mirror behind the counter. "Reflections tell secrets." I blinked, unsure if she meant me. Her voice was soft, calm, but the way it lingered, like a thought that didn't quite leave, made me stir my coffee slower. I'd been coming here for weeks, sometimes twice a day, for the quiet hum of the place, the clatter of cups, the way the sun hit the windows around 10:30. And I'd noticed her the first time, standing by the counter, fingering a small silver ring. She looked like she belonged in an old photograph, except her eyes moved forward, like she was half in the moment and half somewhere else. "You, want the usual?" she asked, as if she'd read my mind. I nodded, and she nodded back, and suddenly I realized she remembered. Not the coffee, the way I liked the lid to click just right or that I stirred exactly 3 times, but me, or maybe not me, something about me, anyway. I felt a little ridiculous for noticing, but I couldn't stop. I sat at the corner table, letting my hands hover over the cup as though the heat might tell me something I hadn't yet learned. Around me, the coffee shop murmured with low conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine. I tried not to glance up at her too often. I failed. She was arranging the pastries again, folding her hands over each other like she was measuring time in the soft press of her palms. I typed a text I wouldn't send, deleted it, and typed another. My thumb hovered over the send button, and then I set the phone down. There was a careful pause in my chest I couldn't shake. A quiet wait. "Did you see the new shipment of books in the corner?" she asked suddenly, folding a napkin with precise fingers, eyes flicking toward the shelves. I followed, even though I already had, and smiled a little. I think she noticed. She didn't comment, just adjusted a stack, and the movement made me remember my own hands, awkwardly pressed together on the table. The barista called an order, a clattering of cups, and she smiled again. This time a little more at me than the mirror. Just the corner of her lips. I wanted to ask her something, anything, but my voice stayed lodged somewhere behind my teeth. When she leaned toward the counter to speak to the cashier, I caught a glimpse of her profile in the window. She was real, solid, human, but something in the way she moved, like she was careful not to occupy too much space, made me achy a little, not for her, exactly, but for the quiet certainty I didn't have. I left the coffee shop later than I intended, the winter sun hitting my eyes, a leftover warmth in my chest. And then my phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was her, not a text I'd been expecting. "Next time, don't forget the sugar, and watch the reflection." I froze, the street humming around me. I didn't know what to do with that, exactly. A joke, a warning, an invitation. I pocketed the phone, walking slower than usual, thinking that sometimes the most ordinary mornings could carry the heaviest secrets. The next time I saw her, it was late afternoon. The kind of light that slips in at an angle and makes everything feel a little fragile. She was at the bookstore across the street, kneeling to reach a low shelf, and I stopped myself from saying anything. She looked up, caught my eyes, and for a second we both lingered there, unsure who would speak first. "I didn't know you liked poetry," she said finally, straightening. There was a small smile tugging at her lips, not quite teasing, not quite shy. "I read a little," I mumbled. "Mostly when it's quiet. Helps me think." She nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. Then, without much ceremony, she bent down and pulled a book from the shelf, held it out to me. "This one. The one that got me through last winter." I took it, noticing the faint smell of her perfume lingering in the air between us. I wanted to say something clever, or meaningful, or at least normal, but I just nodded. "Thanks." We ended up walking to the small cafe nearby. She insisted, softly, that I take the window seat. I made my way over, my hands fidgeting with the strap of my bag, and she followed, carrying her tea as though it weighed more than it should. "It's nothing," she said after a moment, her voice low. "Just hard days sometimes. You know." I didn't, exactly, but I nodded anyway. "Yeah," I said. "I think I get it." She looked at me then, really looked. and the silence stretched long enough that I almost imagined the words she wasn't saying. She sipped her tea, fingers brushing the rim, and I found myself thinking about all the little moments I'd noticed before. The ring she fiddled with, the way she crossed her legs, the way her eyes sometimes trailed off to some place I couldn't reach. Divorced, she said suddenly, almost to herself, as though admitting it made it lighter. The word settled between us, heavier than the steam curling from her cup. I didn't know how to respond. Should I say I understood? Should I change the subject? My throat tightened, and I looked away, tracing a pattern on the table with my finger. We stayed like that for a long time, just sitting, listening to the soft clink of cups, the distant footfalls on the street. My mind spun with possibilities I wouldn't let myself name. Could I say her name in my head without feeling the wrongness of it? Could I imagine a hand brushing against hers without guilt? Then, as if reading my thoughts, she shifted slightly and let her fingers hover over mine for just a second, brushing the back of my hand lightly. I didn't move. My heart did. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought later, after I left, the streetlights casting long shadows across my path, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She smiled again, quiet, almost secretive, the kind of smile that leaves a residue of warmth and confusion at once. And I walked on, carrying it like a fragile secret I wasn't ready to share. I saw her at the corner cafe again. Same window seat, same faint light falling across her cheek. She was reading a folded letter, the edges curled, her thumb pressing along a line she didn't move past. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice caught in my throat. She glanced up, caught my eyes and smiled. Not that full smile, just the corner of the lips kind that made me shift in my seat. I stirred my coffee more than necessary, watching her watch me, and for a moment it felt like the air itself paused. I brought that book you liked, I said, sliding it toward her. She picked it up slowly, fingers brushing mine. That touch should have been brief. It lingered. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked away, toward the street outside. Thanks, she said softly. And then she tucked the book under her arm, a small wall rising without words. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself that maybe I imagined it, but the rhythm of her hands, the slight tremor when she lifted her cup, told me otherwise. There was something she wasn't saying, a careful hesitation that made my chest tighten. Then the cafe door opened. A familiar voice, my friend from the neighborhood, called out. She smiled politely at him, and my own smile felt smaller, diminished. She straightened as if the presence reminded her of boundaries she hadn't voiced yet. I could feel the pull, the tug of something unspoken, and it made me ache in a quiet, pressing way. The waiter dropped a plate with a soft clatter. I reached to steady it, brushing her hand again. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away entirely. My stomach twisted, wanting to pull back, wanting to lean forward, wanting to freeze time altogether. We didn't speak for a while. She sipped her tea, eyes tracing something distant. I traced the rim of my cup with my thumb, tracing invisible lines, imagining the touch of her fingers again, the warmth of her hand in mine. I didn't. She started, then stopped, folding her hands in her lap. I felt my own words stuck, half-formed too. The space between us contracted, a near kiss hovering in the tiny breaths and pauses, in the way her gaze dipped toward my lips and then shot up again. The world outside continued. Footsteps, cars, the distant laughter of strangers. But here, inside, everything was just hesitation. She shifted in her seat, almost imperceptibly, and I thought maybe she'd let it happen, maybe she'd cross that quiet line. But then she leaned back, fingers tightening on the cup, and that wall reappeared, delicate and frustrating. I left that afternoon feeling both closer and further away than ever, carrying the echo of her near touch like a secret I wasn't supposed to own. And in the soft twilight, I realized the danger wasn't just the age, or the timing, or the quiet world we shared. It was how much I wanted something she might never let me have. The tension is now hovering, near confession, near touch, emotional stakes rising without drama. It was just past 6 when I found her sitting on the park bench, the street lamps flickering on one by one, casting long, soft shadows across the pavement. She had her coat pulled tight, hands tucked in the pockets, eyes on the small pond in front of us. The ducks moved lazily, water rippling around them, and for a moment I thought I could hear every quiet thought she'd been keeping inside. I didn't see you yesterday, I said, trying for casual because casual was safe, my hands shoved in my own pockets, tapping against the seam of my jeans. She glanced at me quickly, a flicker of something passing across her face, annoyance, relief. I couldn't tell. I had things, she said, voice low, nothing important. I nodded, but my chest felt tight, a slow pressure that wouldn't let up. I wanted to ask, but the words felt too loud, too exposed. Instead, I sat down beside her, careful to leave space. For a long time we just watched the pond, the water catching the dim light. She twisted the edge of her scarf around her fingers, and I thought about all the times I'd noticed the little motions she didn't intend anyone to see. The soft flick of her eyes, the way she brushed her hair back, the way her lips pressed together when she was thinking. I saw him today, she said suddenly, and I froze slightly. Not the ducks, not the water, just her. Oh, I said. My voice was nothing, but my stomach nodded. Was it bad? She shook her head, not looking at me. No. Just, he reminded me how much I shouldn't want certain things. Her hands unclenched slowly, then rested on her lap. Her eyes were downcast, but I could feel her presence reaching across the small space between us, pressing lightly, dangerously. I don't know why it's so hard, she said, voice dropping almost to a whisper. Sometimes I feel like if I let myself. She stopped, swallowed, and looked at the ground. My heart thumped in response, a quiet, painful rhythm I didn't know how to manage. I wanted to reach for her hand, to say something that might make the tension less sharp, less unbearable, but my fingers froze halfway. The words I'd rehearsed for weeks sat in my throat, heavy and hot. I watched her twist the scarf again, the gesture small but full of meaning. My chest felt hollow, full, aching all at once. She finally looked at me, and her eyes held everything she hadn't said. The fear, the longing, the guilt, the quiet desire to step closer, and yet never move at all. I started, then stopped. My voice trailed, useless in the face of what hung between us. The ducks paddled lazily, the street lamps flickered, and I realized that in this quiet, ordinary moment everything was suspended. One word, one gesture, one step forward, and the fragile balance we'd built could shatter. I shifted closer. She didn't move. I wanted to ask her, to demand an answer, but the words became a question that hovered, unspoken. Do you want me to stay, or am I already too late? The next week, she didn't show up at the cafe. Not at our usual time, not even later in the afternoon when I sometimes hoped she might wander in. I sat with my coffee, stirring it too much, noticing the steam curl and fade, feeling that quiet, hollow tug I'd grown almost used to. I tried her number once. Twice, nothing. Not a reply, not a typing bubble, nothing. The absence was heavier than anything I'd felt before. Like she'd left a small echo of herself that wouldn't stop vibrating. Then I saw her at the bookstore, but she wasn't alone. A younger man, maybe around my age, tall, laughing at something she said. Her hand brushed his arm. I froze at the corner, pretending to look at the shelves, but I saw the curve of her smile, not for me, not the way it had been. I didn't approach, I didn't want to. My chest felt hollow but not broken, exactly, just paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. That evening I drafted a message I would never send. I miss you. Did I do something wrong? My thumb hovered over the send button, then withdrew. I stared at the screen until the words blurred into nothing. A few days later, I noticed her bag left behind at the cafe. A scarf, her pen case, a book with a folded corner. I brought it to the counter, thinking maybe she'd come back to claim it, and she did. But not like before. She appeared tense, brisk, polite in a way that felt like a border between us. Thanks, she said, taking the bag. Her fingers brushed mine for the briefest fraction of a second. Longer than a handshake, shorter than anything intimate. I wanted to lean in, to ask, to stay, but the words faltered again. You've been busy, I said, almost like an apology, almost like a question. Things change, she said, and there was no emphasis, no invitation to continue, just the quiet inevitability of it. She left. That night I imagined a dozen conversations that never happened. Her voice in my head, small admissions, laughter, whispers of the things she hadn't told me. Her hand brushing mine, then pulling away. A smile that wasn't mine to claim. I kept my phone on the nightstand just in case. But I knew she wouldn't text, not tonight, not tomorrow. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next morning I returned to the cafe. My seat waiting for her, coffee cooling, steam curling up and fading before I could notice it fully. The corner where she usually sat remained empty, the light catching just the edge of the window pane. I wanted to call her name across the room, to bridge the space, but my voice stayed lodged somewhere behind my teeth. So I sat, stirred my coffee, waited for a moment that might never come. I found her on the back porch of her apartment, the evening air thin and sharp. She was folding laundry, a quiet rhythm in her hands, her hair catching the last light of day. I stopped on the threshold, unsure if I should call her name or just watch. She glanced up, startled for a second, then softened. "You came," she said, voice low. I nodded, shifting my weight from one foot to the other. "I wanted to see you." She didn't reply immediately. The quiet between us stretched, filled with the soft rustle of cotton and linen, the distant hum of a car engine, the occasional clink of a hanger. My heart thumped quietly, like a metronome only I could hear. "I didn't mean to," she started, then stopped, hands stilling over the fabric. Her eyes flicked to mine, uncertain. "I know," I said, keeping my voice gentle. "I didn't mean to make it complicated either." We were both quiet after that. The kind of quiet that isn't empty. It's loaded with the weight of everything unsaid. I noticed the faint line of worry at the corner of her eyes, the way her fingers lingered on the hem of a shirt longer than necessary. "I thought about us," I said finally, careful, slow. "About everything that's happened. And My voice trailed and I let the pause do the talking. She looked at me, and I thought I saw the same hesitation mirrored there. Not fear exactly, but the weight of choices unmade, of what could slip through if either of us moved too fast, too far. She said, voice catching, "I don't want to hurt you. Or myself. But I don't want to pretend none of this matters either." Her words didn't need finishing. I could feel them in the space between us, a slow, steady ache. I took a small step closer, careful not to invade her space. My fingers hovered near hers, and she didn't pull away. Just a little, barely noticeable, letting her hand brush mine lightly. That was enough. Enough to say what words couldn't. "I don't know what comes next," I admitted softly. "Maybe we can figure it out. Together, if you want." Her lips curved, faint, a quiet acknowledgement. "Okay," she said, and the single word held a universe of trust, fear, and relief. We didn't kiss, we didn't hug. We just stayed there, the hum of the evening around us, hands brushing, shoulders nearly touching. It was ordinary, and in that ordinariness, everything felt honest. I noticed the faint scent of her laundry detergent, the way the light softened her features, the subtle tremor in her hands as she returned a folded shirt to the basket. I wanted to memorize it all, not as a declaration, but as proof that this moment, fragile, tentative, was real. We didn't say anything more. A soft nod, a small smile, a hand lingering a second longer. And that was enough. Enough to let the world continue, and enough to let us step into it together, even if cautiously. Weeks passed before I saw her again in the same way. Not by chance, but deliberately. The corner cafe had settled into its usual rhythm, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low chatter, the faint clink of spoons against cups. I arrived at 80:47 a.m., my favorite spot by the window, and she was already there, folding the newspaper, a thermos of black coffee beside her. "Morning," I said softly, sliding into the seat across from her. She looked up, a slow smile spreading, not flashy, just enough to make the light in the cafe feel warmer. "Morning," she replied, letting her eyes linger on mine a second longer than necessary. We didn't need to speak much. The coffee arrived, dark and steaming, the mug slightly chipped. She passed me a sugar packet, our fingers brushing. I felt the small spark of familiarity, the tiny gesture that had become language between us. Later we walked to the bench by the park, the one where the ducks paddled lazily, water glinting in the late morning sun. She carried her tea in a travel mug, I held mine black. We didn't talk about the past weeks, the absences, or the things we almost said. Those moments existed quietly between us, like pages bookmarked but not rewritten. At one point, she gained her head slightly toward mine, resting it against my shoulder. I didn't move. The warmth settled in, grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" I murmured, voice low. She laughed quietly, a sound that wasn't ironic, just real. "Not always. But here we are." There was no grand confession, no sweeping declaration, just the comfort of proximity, the way our routines had folded together without effort. Tea shared, hands brushing, moments remembered, the coffee cup at 8:47 am, the bench by the pond, the folded scarf she left behind months ago. Time passed slowly, deliberately. I noticed the way she laughed at small things now, the way she stirred her tea with a fingertip instead of the spoon, the way her gaze found mine when she thought I wasn't looking. Each detail was a quiet reassurance that we'd survived the hesitation, the almosts, the boundaries we'd been careful to respect. When I walked her home, the sun low in the sky, she paused at her door. "See you tomorrow," she asked, casual, but her smile held everything the words did not. "See you tomorrow," I said, and the weight in my chest eased just a little. Later, I thought about the reflection in the cafe mirror from that first morning, her warning, "Careful. Reflections tell secrets." I realized then that the secret wasn't danger, it was patience, it was the quiet endurance of noticing, of waiting, of letting small gestures become proof of something deeper. I didn't need her to say it aloud, I knew, and I smiled to myself, a soft, private acknowledgement, the kind only she and I would understand. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?